Hello, everyone. I'm Paris Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to 12 O'Clock High, a podcast on business leadership with Tom Fox.
Today I visit with Sabine Kvenberg. She is a professional coach. She is a world-renowned speaker, and she will talk to us about the leadership skill of listening, which is a great conversation to have for any chief compliance officer. Also, she will talk to us about how you can assert yourself without really turning negative in the corporate arena. It's a fascinating exploration. I know you'll enjoy this episode. 12 O'Clock High is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network. Before we get started, a word from our network sponsor, Ethico.
If you're a compliance officer, middle managers are crucial in getting your programs from you to your frontline employees. But how do we activate those managers and get them on our side? Ethico's new Middle Manager Toolkit equips you with the skills needed to empower your managers, to promote a culture where ethical behavior thrives and employees feel empowered to speak up. Learn how to turn frontline managers into ethical leaders with our new white paper, Empowering Middle Managers as Ethics Champions. And did I mention you can get the whole toolkit for free? Head to ethico.com to download the full toolkit today.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, back for another episode. Now, today I'm absolutely thrilled to have Sabine Kvenberg with me. Why am I thrilled? Because I'm in for a treat, because you're in for a treat. And we're going to chat about some areas that really highlight, I think, a great topic of personal growth and how you can achieve that in a variety of areas. So, with that incredibly long-winded introduction, first of all, Sabine, welcome. And thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Well, I am thrilled to be here and share my wisdom and expertise with your audience.
Could you tell us a little bit about your professional background?
Okay. So actually started in Germany. That's where I'm originally from. And before I really started my passion, I was caught in a job that I didn't like as a little claim adjuster. And that was not me being an entertainer. So one day I felt myself staring out of the window, thinking I cannot do this for the next 40 years. What is mine to do, right? Ask and you shall receive. That same week, I had a chance meeting with my former drama and music teacher, Mr. Herbst. And in our little chit chat that we had as I walked home from my work, he asked me a question, a very important question. And he said, Sabine, are you still active with what you love to do, acting, singing, dancing with your groups? And my answer was no. And then he just said one sentence that literally changed my life. He said, what a shame, Sabine. You are so talented. That's what you love. And that, Tom, I tell you, changed everything for me. I was reminded by a mentor that this is my passion. This is what I'm good at. And that same day I went home, I called an acting school, scheduled my audition, got in, started my career, a new career as an actress and musical theater performer. And I never looked back. That was the beginning of my career as a performer.
Well, now bring us up to date with your journey to becoming empowered or become empowered. I'm thrilled to always visit with a fellow podcaster and a fellow author. So what led to the concept of become empowered?
So that really was an accumulation of several things that came that I started my podcast. I lived already in the United States and I've met this wonderful gentleman named Prince Kremitzos, who is doing this Podfest. And he invited me to participate. And I loved it. There was, again, something that I love to do. But I wasn't ready there yet, even though I started my first podcast there, Living Out Loud. That was my title. And then I let it go. But throughout my career, what I do now, I am a communication and confidence coach, teaching others how to communicate better, how to become greater speakers. In that area, I was speaking with a colleague, and she was listening to my background and she said, "Oh my gosh, your music, you have to share that." And shortly thereafter, I woke up in the middle of the night and one word came about. And that may be something that goes back to the very beginning, what I shared with you, that story. I always ask, okay, what is my next step? What is the next thing I ought to do to serve on a greater level? And I woke up in the middle of the night and that one word, become, become, came into my mind. And I thought, wow, yes. So couple months later, I started my first podcast because I wanted to interview individuals from all walks of life, sharing their story of becoming their next greater self. Because we always develop and grow, talking about personal growth. And that really led me to the next of my work where I am currently am as a communication confidence coach, empowering others to become their next greater self. And it all starts with the right communication.
Tell me about your experience at Podfest.
Well, which one do you mean? The first one or the last one?
What year was your first one?
That was 2017. And I was so impressed and excited. And there was one table where I could actually download an app to start my podcast. Because that's very cool. So what I did, Tom, that year, I actually went into my car, connected my smartphone and the app, and started just talking about my experience that I had at Podfest. That was so exciting. And the whole family experience, all the other podcasters. And so I entitled that first podcast, Living Out Loud, because I wrote a song called Live Your Life Out Loud. And that was my intro music. And then I started speaking. And that was my very first experience.
So how does learning how to communicate facilitate becoming empowered?
Well, it began by people sharing their empowered story. And when we communicate, one of the things that I always encourage is use stories when you communicate, when it's appropriate, because we can connect to stories. We can make connections to our life or whatever we want to learn or teach. So that was a very important part. So when I interviewed those individuals, it became very successful, my podcast. And I had so many people who wanted to be on the podcast, wanted to be interviewed. So I, again, start thinking, what else can I do? What other outlet can I use to share stories? And that then turned into a book. But here's the very first thing when we communicate, starts with self-communication. And when you realize how we communicate with ourselves better, we can grow and improve and then communicate with others on a greater and better level. So that's how it all works together.
Many of the listeners to this podcast work in corporations. They work in corporate compliance, corporate legal, corporate finance, CEOs, CFOs, etc. How do these strategies that you help teach, facilitate, and communicate really help people in the corporate world as well?
Yes, yes. And so I'm glad that you brought that up. I just recently did a training and I spoke for women specifically that deal with technology in the tech world. And they were very self-conscious about speaking up. But it's important that we speak up to lead. And when I work with corporations and companies, when they invite me to speak, I share with them that there are certain things that you can do to, first of all, feel better when you communicate. But when you know how to communicate to your team better. You feel more confident and then thus competent to relate that message to your team or even to your boss or to your client. The outcome will be totally different. So those are the things. And when I talk with them, I gave them a couple very easy points. And oftentimes those easy things are being overlooked. Number one is have a clear objective and have a goal. So what is the result that you want to see? Either with your team, what kind of actions would you like them to take, right? And then the second is when we get nervous, when we don't know, oh, I'm so nervous, I forget what I wanted to say. Easy things to just write down bullet points and mentally rehearse them. From coming from the entertainment industry, that's what we did. We had to rehearse so we feel comfortable and confident to go out on stage to say our lines, right? And it's not so much different. And then the third thing is, if appropriate, incorporate a story. It could be something like, hey, a story from a client. They used this or did that, and that resulted into XYZ. And that oftentimes gives that connection to the team. Oh, wow, that's actually very exciting, interesting. Yeah, I want to do this. I want to take the steps that you asked me to do. So those are just a couple of things that I share with the teams that I speak to.
How do you define effective communication?
So effective communication has something to do with what we say and how we say it and how we come across. So let me give you an example. How we come across. Oftentimes when people feel not confident, automatically what happened is the body language expresses that. So you say it, how you say it with your body and also with your voice. So if somebody is self-conscious, oftentimes jump forward, maybe not having the eye contact. So that's the first thing that I teach them. Hey, you know what? Confidence starts with your physicality, your body language. And there's some simple steps you can do to kind of feel better, trick your mind or your inner chemistry, just having like a stance, like a power stance that evokes something in your body's chemistry that makes you feel a little bit more confident. The second thing is your voice, your vocal variety, how you say things. Are you soft spoken? Are you talking way too fast because you want to make sure that everything is coming across, but you're very, very nervous and you speak fast and walk, and you have word salads. So when you learn how to speak in a moderate tone, tempo, have that vocal variety, people on the other side are more likely to listen to you and also understand you. And then last, what you say, the word that you choose are very important because sometimes when we do not prepare effectively, we might say the wrong things. And then lastly, the medium that you use when you communicate. As you know, we can communicate via email, text, Zoom, or in person. All of these you have to have like different, you have to be careful with those mediums because when you write a text or an email, that can come across sometimes in the wrong way. So when you're in person, it's much easier to get your feelings or the energy across that you cannot in an email.
How do you help people become, or can you help them become better listeners? Because communication is a two-way street. It is both output and input, and it's communication backup, particularly if you're talking to an employee or other person in a corporation. How do you help people to be able to, I don't want to say speak up, but communicate back and listen up?
Yes. Oh, that's a very good question. I'm so glad that you asked that, Tom. Yes. And you may have heard the phrase, listen more than you speak. And this is so true also in corporate America or in any companies for that matter. When we listen first to our colleagues, our teams, or even our boss, to really understand them. Because when people have the feeling they're being seen, heard, and understood, they are more likely to work together with you. So, my first suggestion that I make is be very clear what the other side has to say, and then listen to it without interrupting them. Then you can respond accordingly, right? And being in Toastmasters, or I've been in Toastmasters, I'm a distinguished Toastmaster. One of the things that we learned there is how do we give feedback? And that is another very important thing, that you listen first. Then the feedback that you give always start out with something positive. When you give positive reinforcement, find something that you liked about what they said, that you agree on, and then bring it up and say, hey, wonderful, I really like that. Now, if you want to improve something, or if you want to give a feedback that you want them to take action on, then say, here is a suggestion, or in order for our group or our team, our company to grow, we would like to incorporate ABC. So then you can also say, or the one thing that you did in your work, how about we change this up a little bit? Because I think and I believe that when we change it up, it would result into ABC. You see, when you have that first listening, then the positive feedback and reinforcement, then you have the opposite party being more open and receptive to your feedback and are more eager to incorporate that.
Is that something that you can help either facilitate, you can help train on, or you can literally coach people on both of those skills, speak up and listen up?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, like with everything, it's not one thing you do once and then you're perfect. It's not something you listen, for example, you listen to this podcast and you probably get some ideas. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. But then you get back into your old routine. So when I work with my clients, first of all, I always listen to what are they struggling with. And then I make a very quick assessment on what are the symptoms or the root causes. And then I address those first. And then I have exercises that are very simple and fun for them to improve some of the things that they're struggling with. Most importantly, it all comes back to confidence and then a couple of the techniques to become a better speaker and presenter.
Let me turn to your podcast. What would you say is the core message of your show?
The core message is to let people know that they are not alone in their struggles and that there's always a way out or silver lining for them to get through any challenging situations and become their next greater self. So when my guests share their story of overcoming struggles, oftentimes they are in business, all kinds of areas. It's not all peach and cream, right? It's really the struggle of overcoming the hardest part. And when people listen, they listen to stories. Again, stories are very effective because we can relate to them. But then my listeners also share how they got through it. And each of my audience will listen differently to their outcome, and they can hopefully put it into their own lives in the knowing they are not alone. And I can do that too. Give them encouragement and empowerment.
Now, let me ask you about your book, Become Empowered: Echoes of Grace and Strength. And I want to focus on the word grace because, frankly, that's not a word I see often associated with communication, the corporate world, or much else. So, why the word grace? What does it mean to you? And how can we put grace into practice?
Very good question. You see, sometimes we are so much into our own, what I said, ego. I wanted to do this way and this way, or why is it happening to me? And not allowing just to sit, to let maybe higher forces help you with that. And it doesn't matter what your belief is, but I believe there is a higher power in this world. People call it by different names. And this is the grace part. And when you read the stories in the book, which is, by the way, uh, 10, 13 women, including myself, I have 12 other co-authors who share their story, real life story of transformation and triumph. And I saw that silver lining there when I put together that book, and that was grace. And when we allow that grace to happen and just be open and have that higher power, that God, or again, whatever name you give that creator, step into our lives and be open to guidance, this is when things change. And I oftentimes, without going into religion, but that energy of grace, I put into my coaching, and that comes across. And people can feel that that is an energy. And oftentimes I start with a short prayer or meditation so that people can come into that right space when it's appropriate.
How does, or what would you say is your current mission, but equally, where do you see your mission 5 years down the road? Will it be more of the same? Do you see an evolution? Are you continually growing? You strike me as an eternally curious person. So that's just what I've garnered so far from the pod. Where do you see your future for your mission and your vision?
Growth is utterly important to me. Yes, and I'm a very curious person. I always love to explore new things. And as you can see in my career, from being a business person, claim adjuster, to become an actress and a director, and then I started my own business. I had a performing arts school. And from that, I wrote my first book, Secrets on How to Succeed in Showbiz, to help my students to become better. And then later on, I became a speaker and spoke at many different things. And through that evolution myself, and through that growth myself, I was able to help others in a greater way. And now where I am in communication, especially where we are in time, where communication has changed so drastically, how we communicate, right? I mean, we have our phone here, and especially the younger generation hardly want to pick up the phone and talk. They text to each other, even if they sit beside each other. So I wanted to make sure that that I bring across the point that when we learn how to communicate our message and mission better, we can make a greater impact, and thus also help us. And that's my hope to communicate, even if we have different opinions about things or different views about things. I mean, we see it right now where we are in time here in the United States to say, you know what, even if you have a different opinion, we still can talk about it and we don't have to be foes. I think that's, find a post. I think that's what it is. We want to be friends, right? So this is my mission. And also, if someone can communicate what they do, the mission that they have and how they serve, they can make a greater impact. And that is what I'm passionate about to achieve within the next 5 years, to have a better and more friendly world.
Well, Sabine, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode. But before we leave, I wanted to ask you if our listeners wanted to connect with you, learn more about Become Empowered, or really find out more about the services and consulting practice you have, where would be the best place or places for them to go?
The easiest is my website, SabineKvenberg.com. SabineKvenberg. I know that's a hard word. .com. You find everything out there. But you can also contact me if you just want to talk. Just go to talktosabine.com and schedule a time. And I'm happy to talk to you. Or if somebody wants to book me as a speaker, you can connect me either way.
Well, Sabine, I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to visit with me. It's a real pleasure to be able to visit with you, and I hope we can continue this conversation.
Oh, I would love to. And thanks for having me, Tom.
Compliance Podcast Network is sponsored this month by Ethico. Ethico is a leader for compliance champions like yourself with its ethics and compliance optimization system built to turn goals and guidelines into real ROI for your program. For more information and a special white paper, go to ethico.com/CPN.